What's the luckiest thing that's ever happened to you? Managing to survive a shipwreck miles off the coast of Mexico and managing to get back to the States after losing all of my papers. When I was 14, my father and I had this really cool dream of sailing around the world after I had graduated high school. He grew up sailing, I grew up sailing, so it was pretty much something that was going to happen. We'd begun planning the trip for quite some time and had a course totally mapped out. The one thing we needed, however, was a bigger boat. We had a close friend, Reverend Jim. He wasn't actually a reverend, he just called himself that, who had spent his entire life sailing in this beautiful custom-hulled boat. He had circumnavigated the world in it and had spent a good portion of his life living in the Mediterranean on it. Anyways, he had always told my father that when he was ready to return to land, the boat would be his. Finally, that day came. Only problem, the boat was in Guatemala and we were in Connecticut. The plan was to sail the boat in a few short trips, Guatemala to Belize, Belize to Cancun, Mexico, Cancun to Florida, Florida to New York City. The first leg went fine and the boat ended up in Belize. Then we returned to sail the boat from Belize to Cancun. The first day was interesting. Sailing out of Belize City is a bit of a challenge as there are reefs everywhere. I mean everywhere. We were using old sketch charts from the 80s, which seemed to be pretty accurate, but it was a long day, me standing in the boat spotting reefs and my dad steering as we navigated through reefs towards the channel. The first night out on the water was beautiful as there was a lunar eclipse that night. We were relaxing and sailing through the night when we spotted a large tanker a couple hundred yards ahead of us. We radioed them just to make sure they saw us. Turns out they could visibly see us, but we were not showing up on the radar. At this point, we realized that both of us would have to be awake for the duration of the trip in order to avoid any calamity with larger vessels. After the third day of taking very few naps, calamity struck. The unpredicted storm rolled through and caused things to go haywire. We had come up through the Straits of Cozumel and the wind was blowing at around 30 to 40 knot. Big rolling waves began to settle in and the boat was starting to get thrown around. Eventually, the waves got big enough that as we went down to the trough of the wave, our mast was not receiving any wind at all. We were just sitting ducks. Each wave picked us up and threw us closer and closer to a reef that was slightly more inland. Eventually, we were thrown onto the reef and the hull cracked as it was pierced by the reef. I have no recollection of the next bit and neither does my father. Apparently, PTSD set in and we've both forgotten what happened. We spent the next week in Mexico as I worked in a hotel so we would be able to stay there, and he spent that time trying to repair the damages we had done to the reef and remove the boat from there. We lost the boat and ended up on a crazy bout of plane rides home. Sorry if the details get hazy towards the end. Like I said, PTSD and time have kind of forced me to forget some of them. So this random boat comes out to us, powerboat, and just picks us up, no questions asked. We had been swimming at that point and were somewhere between the coast and the reef we had hit. They said he had seen us jump overboard and heard our cries for help over the radio. They brought us back to this random resort that, if I recall correctly, was extremely sketchy. My dad told me to just sit by as he dealt with the men. They were all Mexican and were people who worked at this resort. He came back and told me that they were going to go back to the boat and take whatever equipment they wanted as payment. They went and did so, and tried to take the sails. My father said no to the sails since we would certainly need them once we got it off of the reef. Nighttime hits and they put us in a van with a bunch of their workers which drives about 30 minutes to a town called Puerto Morales. They drop us off and tell us of this hotel nearby called El Hotel de Amor. We show up and inform the owner of our situation. She luckily had a free room and agreed that if I worked there during the days for her, we could stay there for free. That went on for about a week. At some point, immigration people came by and customs people asked for us. They kind of just looked at us and said, okay, went about their business. I was seriously confused by that and still am. We ended up contacting my mother who had been trying to figure out what exactly happened to us. She managed to book us a flight that left from Cozumel and went to Houston, Texas. After that week, my father and I prepared to leave. As we were leaving, we received a mysterious note that said roughly, "My name is Guillermo. I saw what happened with your boat. It is imperative that you speak with me. I will be," I forgot where he said, "at 2 p.m. today to speak." We just said screw that and tried to leave. To get to Cozumel, you have to take a ferry from Playa del Carmen. So we managed to get a cab ride there and had to wait for the ferry to show up. There were federals everywhere, and we did not want to risk anything getting us the hell out of Mexico. My father looked at me, handed me my ticket and all the money we had and said, "No matter what, get on that boat." He left me there alone, at 14. His thinking was that they would be looking for a father and son and we would definitely fit the bill. We met up on the ferry. We got to the airport and somehow made it through customs and everything, but our flight was delayed for 6 hours. That time passing was probably the hardest thing to deal with. We were terrified and worried that it was being delayed for us. Finally, the flight took off. We landed in Houston and missed our connection flight, but neither of us cared. It was not about being in her house, it was about being home. Never had the United States been such a beautiful thing until the moment the plane wheels hit the tarmac. So, has this story been made into a movie yet? 'Cause damn. Story 2. I totally should have drowned on 2 separate occasions. Story 1. When I was around 3 or 4, my mom was with me by the pool in her backyard. She was cleaning the patio nearby with a hose. I was just chilling out being a toddler. Anyway, she had her back turned to me for a few moments. When she turned around again, I was nowhere in sight. Turns out I decided to crawl into the pool. She jumped in and I was already at the bottom, apparently with a big smile on my face. Don't know why. I hadn't the slightest idea how to swim. When she pulled me out, I was giggling with joy. She didn't find it as funny, apparently. Story 2. I was about 9 or 10. My brother and I had this nice tucked-away beach all to ourselves in Santa Cruz. It was about a 100-yard stretch of beach with 2 rocks closing in. Very cozy. Anyway, he was taking a nap and I got in a bit over my head going out to the 7-foot breakers. I screwed up and took a wave the wrong way, pounded against the seafloor a bit and swallowed a bunch of water. When the wave subsided, I was too out of it or weak to fight the riptide, and I floated out again just to get hit by another wave. Brother somehow woke up, came out, grabbed me, and swam me back in. He's a lifeguard, so I was fortunate to have that on my side. I had swallowed too much water to yell, so I don't know how he woke up, but I would have definitely passed away. He probably hasn't thought twice about it, but I definitely remember it every time I'm close to the ocean. Story 3. If it wasn't for a vacation in political turmoil, I would not have met my wife. My aunt moved to France from Poland to learn to bake professionally, then to the US. She met her husband in Detroit, then because of what my cousins call mob problems, they moved to Texas in the 1970s. In 1980, my dad said, "Let's visit my sister in the US for a few months." So I left with my dad at the age of 3. My pregnant mother and younger sister stayed in Poland. Mom is still annoyed that I ran off to the plane instead of giving her one last kiss or hug. I was 3. But hey, we'll be back well before she's due, right? Then the strikes happened in Gdansk. Martial law was declared. We couldn't come back. 4 years later, my mother and siblings managed to get visas and come join us. My dad sees my brother for the first time. Mom and dad meet other Polish people in the area. We hang out with one family because the daughters are the same age as we are. Cool. Then we get a chance to visit Poland again. Communism was going away, everything became open again. I go with my dad and sister. Family friend says, "Hey, you can stay with my sister when you go through their town." We do so. Dad bought a camcorder and we recorded messages to bring back with us. Dad films us while we play, including their younger daughter. He filmed me hitting her with a pillow and then as she kicked me down there, we leave, travel around for a bit longer and then return to the US. Time passes. Family friends move far away for jobs, but we keep in touch. Mom and her friend talk once every few months. 13 years later, it's my mom's 50th birthday. I'm hiking in the Grand Canyon at the time. Her friend, who had moved several times over the years, comes back to visit and brings her niece, the kicking girl, along with her. She's visiting her aunt for a few months and is planning on returning to Poland soon. In the meantime, she sticks around after the party for my mom. I return from my trip and there's a strange woman in my house. Okay, I'll show her around, but Texas is kind of big. Anyway, it gets interesting, then serious. And then I give her a ring a month later. My parents don't know yet. We tell them a month after, just when they are leaving to go to Florida. We ruined Dad's vacation because he spends the week thinking she's pregnant. She wasn't. He was just afraid to ask. They get back and we think about the wedding. Her visa is running out. It's a pain to do it all later, so Dad says, "Well, you gave her a ring. Might as well get married now instead of waiting." We plan a quick wedding in 2 weeks and surprise absolutely everyone. The reveal at work was a blast. Wedding was fun, with the typical Polish wedding games like egg up the pant leg and does she know her way around the kitchen, or the sausage game. Best man said he had never had more fun at a wedding, including his own. He fell out of his chair laughing when Dad played back the video of her kicking me. All went well. Afterwards, family and friends on both sides of the pond expected her to be pregnant or wanting a green card, or after the vast family fortune. Really, it was just us and what we wanted. Last week was her 10th anniversary. She's my best friend and I'm hers. Had my aunt and uncle not run from the mob, we'd have never met my wife's aunt and family. They might have been stuck in Detroit. Had I stayed in Poland, we'd have never met. We were so far apart that it would have been very unlikely. Had her aunt and uncle stayed in Kenya instead of taking a teaching job in Texas, we'd have never met. Had she visited her aunt at any other time, she would not have driven 12 hours just to come to Texas. So many things had to happen to us to be together. I was expecting the story to be about immigration coming after the two of them. They get the best of them by showing the kicking video to prove you actually knew each other. Now I might Google these Polish wedding games. If you're curious about them too, then don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel so you wouldn't miss out on any of my upcoming videos. Story 4. I got to spend the last 9 days of my father's life with him in Alaska. My parents said for years that they would go on their dream trip to Alaska when my mom retired. She's still several years from retiring, but last December, my dad told her that they should go ahead and do it. So they started making plans for this past summer. In March or so, I jokingly said that they should stick me in their bags and let me come with them. A couple weeks later, they asked if I was really serious about wanting to go, and would my husband like to go as well. They said they would help us pay for it as an anniversary gift, if we were okay with helping with my dad and carrying luggage and whatnot. He was in a wheelchair. Of course. Fast forward to the summer, and we had 9 amazing days in Alaska with my parents. They live 3 states away, and we only got to see them for the occasional 4-day weekend every few months, so getting to spend that much time with them was amazing. We saw moose and bears and caribou, going on dog sled rides, and going out on boats to ride the rapids or look for whales. On Father's Day morning, after he talked to my brother and his grandkids on video chat, we all went out on a whale watching trip. It was perfect. Even the guides in the boat said it was the most amazing trip they had ever seen. We got to see 9 humpback whales jump out of the water together as they caught fish in a net of bubbles. They got to see 4 orcas, and one of them even breached the water in an awesome jump that is rare in the wild. And he got it all on a perfect sunny day. Not a cloud in the sky to cover the mountains and glaciers all around us. On the way back, he and my mom said that this was what they had come to Alaska to see, and that they couldn't have asked for a more amazing trip. An hour later, my dad had a cardiac event that he wouldn't wake up from. I miss him every day, but I'm so incredibly lucky that I got to spend that much time with him right before he left us, and that my dad got pretty much the perfect last week of his life, surrounded by people he loved. Not many people get that. Damn, it's nice to know that he died in peace. Story 5. I just turned 30. Some failed relationships behind me, as we all have, including a cheating fiancé. Anyway, I went out for breakfast with my mother one morning, to one of our favorite restaurants. We sat down, and then I heard someone calling my name from the next booth over. I look over and see a friend of mine. With her is a beautiful woman, blonde hair, blue eyes, exactly my type. I would love to be able to say I was perfectly suave and swept her off her feet. However, nerves got the better of me, and I stammered hello, mumbled some inane small talk, and even shook her hand at the end of the conversation. I went back to my breakfast feeling like a total buffoon. I sat there thinking that I had to do something to redeem myself. I managed to catch the eye of my friend who was with her and mouthed, "Is she single?" She got a little smirk on her face and subtly nodded yes. I just about had a heart attack. At this point, I think she lost patience and indicated she would send me this blonde beauty's email address after she found out if it was okay to do so from her friend. Little did I know that at the same time I was prodding for info, the blonde girl, whose name was Heather, I'd finally remembered, was asking for details about me. Breakfast ended and I said goodbye to the 2 of them and went home. 2 hours later, email address in hand, I sent off my hello message to Heather and immediately got a response. Our first date was a week later, and now, 7 years later, we're coming up on our 5th wedding anniversary, and we have a beautiful, sweet little girl who is the spitting image of her mother. Heather carried me through some terrible times when I was the primary caregiver for my mother, who passed away from cancer after a 2-year struggle. I don't know how I would have survived all the horrid events that come with home care of a terminal cancer patient without the constant love and support of this amazing woman. The fact she stayed with me during this time, even though we had just started dating when my mother's diagnosis was discovered, amazes me and still brings me to tears. I love my wife, and thank goodness I decided to take a day off work and go for breakfast with my mother. Luckiest day of my life. Damn, him not remembering her name was a good misdirection. Almost thought they didn't end up together. Story 6. A while back, I was unemployed, broke as hell, and job searching like crazy. I had applied to at least 30-plus places and had some interviewers over the course of 5 months, but remained jobless. One night, I decided to walk to the local pizza place instead of getting it delivered. My fiancé at the time bought the pizza. While on the walk back, I noticed a baby bird laying in the middle of the road. I stopped, stared at it for a moment before picking it up and setting it under a nearby bush. Next day, I received a call from one of the places I'd recently interviewed at, asking if I could come fill in some paperwork. Sure, yeah, absolutely. Well, it turns out the hiring manager was with her girlfriend at the bar, having a drink on the patio, and happened to see me save the bird. Earlier in the day, she'd been going through all of the potential applicants, and after seeing that, decided to hire me right then. It's been a little over a year now. I no longer have my fiancé, but I still have the same job, and I recently got promoted to shift leader. Not only that, but the manager and I have become fairly good friends, and she's helped me out in my personal life a lot as well. Not much to be proud of, I suppose, but I couldn't have asked for anything better. Character is what you do when you think nobody's looking. Story 7. About 6 or 7 years ago, a couple of friends and I were stuck in traffic in my friend's SUV in broad daylight. An older lady and her 35-ish daughter were in the car next to us, and the daughter rolled up the window in order to tell us something. My friend opened his window too. The woman said, "I'm feeling really dizzy and my mother doesn't know how to drive. Could one of you boys please get in our car and drive us to a hospital nearby? Because I think I might faint. They were pretty normal-looking people, nothing shady about them, so we said why not among each other. However, we found out that their car had a manual transmission and none of us knew how to drive stick. So we ended up saying sorry and went our own way, feeling really sad for them. Fast forward 3 years later, one day I was watching the news and saw one particular story that some harmless-looking people, mostly old folks, used this trick to lure people in their car, only to be tailed by their partners in crime and then rob them at some point. I have to state that the people mentioned in the news were not the old woman and her daughter we encountered a couple years ago, but an old man and a young male. Still, I think we've dodged a bullet. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're gonna love this. Catch you in that video.